whenever you take an inanimate object and you say, this is going to bring me love, or it's going to bring me courage or happiness or wealth, that's witchcraft.
Hey witches, welcome back to the channel. Once again, this is Hectarius, Witch of the Realms. For today's video, I want to basically go into a little bit of a discussion of the prophetic, psychic implication and messages involved with the recent event, the White Stag, that was shot and killed in, what town was it? Merseyside, Bootle. Right. I don't know if you all saw this story. It was September 26th that this happened, Sunday. Basically, what happened was a white stag was in this city and people were freaking out about it for some reason. Like, that's a pretty common thing around here in the United States, that there will just be deers in town or whatever, and no one really makes a big deal about it. No one really cares or gets scared or anything. It's just, you will just see deer in your yard and stuff like that. And they are relatively harmless, of course. They're deer. They don't really do anything. But for some reason, with this particular circumstance and case, people were freaking out about this stag being in the city, and the police got involved and they were trying to hunt and chase down this stag to capture it and re-release it, I guess, somewhere else. And their many attempts to do so failed, and ultimately they just shot and killed it. That's more or less just a brief summary of the story of what happened. I don't know if I mentioned this, but this happened in the UK. But if you're familiar with mythology, and in particular Celtic, Irish, you know, European mythology, the white stag is very much one of those mystical creatures. Also, by the way, real quick, I just wanted to thank Julie for sending me this bracelet and some other gifts. So I'm fidgeting with down here. But thank you for that. I really loved the gifts that you sent, Julie. But the white stag is very much associated with the other world, the fairy realm, the other side, the sort of higher spiritual dimension. And the white stag is one of the animals that is seen to be sort of a messenger, or a form that these spiritual beings take on to come into our realm. And in particular, there's a lot of associations that they take this form when bringing messages to our realm. White stags are rare in nature. They have a special and particular sort of pigmentation mutation in their DNA in their genetics that causes them to lose pigmentation and just appear like an albino, basically. So they're very rare in nature, and that's sort of why they take on this significance and symbolism. Of course, the color of white is also very symbolic of purity and connection with the other side as well, the other world in particular, and spirits from there. And there's a lot of mythology about hunting the white stag, and how they're particularly elusive, how they can be almost impossible to capture, sort of going along with that, hunting them, chasing them down, but not being able to capture them. In the mythology, they also end up leading you somewhere that you wouldn't have discovered otherwise in that chase. And so that ends up being like the real end goal of hunting one. Not to actually end up capturing it or killing it, but it leads you somewhere that you wouldn't have gone before in many mythologies and myths. There's also the concept that they represent purity, and they represent sort of this divine ethereal essence as well. And so killing one is also sort of seen as a profanity because of that aspect. Like, they represent a higher spiritual being taking on the form of a stag. So it also sort of reminds me almost of the mythology with the unicorn, and how killing a unicorn is considered a profane act and an impure act, and portends something, dark, something devastating and tragic. Not only in killing it, also you see the symbolism in the killing of a white dove, that purity, that essence of divine nature. In and of itself, killing something that pure is considered something evil and dark, but it also portends something evil and dark to come in the future because of that transgression. So you also have that aspect to consider when you consider that, the police killed this white stag. And there is something in the story that I wanted to point out as well. This is from Newsweek.com, where they reported on the story on September 30th. I just wanted to read this real quick because I thought it was very interesting. The Royal Society of Prevention of Cruelty of Animals, RSPCA, told the Merseyside police to just leave the deer as it would make its own way back home. So they were, the police were advised to just leave the deer alone, like it's not going to do anything, and it will eventually leave on its own. So why the police chose to still try to chase it and try to capture it is just, it's a very odd story. But the police did not want to let the deer wander, so officers attempted to capture the rare stag. Eventually, police managed to secure the deer on an industrial estate. They called a veterinarian to monitor its well-being, but officers were unable to find an organization who could assist with recovering the deer safely. Over time, the deer became more and more distressed. Obviously, if you're cornering it and trapping it, then it's going to become a problem because it's getting scared for its life, for its own safety. Of course, it's going to, get distressed and maybe act out aggressively. So it seems like the police escalated this event to the point to where they had to kill it, rather than just leaving it alone. In conjunction with advice from a local vet, the attempts over 9 hours were made to tranquilize the deer, and a rural location was identified to safely transfer it, to minimize further distress and ensure its safety, the Deputy Chief Constable Ian Critchley said in a public statement on Tuesday. Despite several tranquilizer darts being successfully deployed into the deer, this failed to sedate the animal. At 6:35 p.m., the police made the decision to kill the animal. All the officers at the scene were absolutely gutted at having to shoot the animal. The officers had been engaged for 9 hours at the incident and had been actively trying to capture the deer for more than 5 hours, so were totally committed to relocating the animal. However, we had to ensure that a distressed deer did not prevent any danger to public safety. So, like I said, they're the ones who made the deer distressed. And then they're saying they're trying to make sure that the distressed deer didn't present any danger. So it's just so contrived that they did this. Some residents were reportedly upset with the decision. I respect people will have different views, but I can categorically say every single effort was made to save and relocate the deer, and I am proud of all my officers who were involved in this difficult and challenging incident. So that was all quoted by the Chief Deputy Critchley. But what's interesting to me is the fact they were trying to capture the stag for several hours. They supposedly shot the stag with several tranquilizers, and they had no effect on it. So I thought that was very interesting, because according to the mythology, once again, the stag is something that, when hunted, eludes being captured and eludes being killed. So it's very interesting that they tried to capture it and tried to tranquilize it, and it was just to no avail. Of course, until ultimately they decided to shoot to kill it. But yeah, I thought that was an interesting aspect to this, that it was able to elude them and able to withstand being tranquilized, because that very much fits with the mythology. Now, on the aspect of this stag being killed and what that represents and what that symbolizes and what that portends, I feel that there's a lot of different ways you can interpret this, of course, and I'm probably not the only one who's going to make a video about this or try to interpret it psychically or anything like that, or prophetically. But what I feel from this, particularly with the timing, this occurred on September 26th, shortly after the equinox, and leading into October, leading towards Samhain. There are associations with the white stag, with Samhain in particular, when you consider the connections of the white stag to different deities like Herne the Hunter, and the concept of the wild hunt as well. In that connection, I feel that the timing of this is not a coincidence. The themes of death and rebirth that go along with Samhain as well, I feel, are connected to this. I also had some other psychic events and dreams recently that I feel are connected to this as well, in particular about the wild hunt. When I tried to tune into this and get like an impression, a psychic message from it, at first I felt that there would be, like a more darker theme, a darker message with this, because of the aspect of killing something so pure and how that can only manifest, devastating circumstances in the world as a consequence. However, when I tuned into this psychically and actually tried to receive information from it, this message kept repeating in my mind. The death is the resurrection. The death is the resurrection. That kept repeating in my mind over and over again. And as I sat with that message, I thought that this animal, this beautiful white stag being killed and sacrificed almost, because like I said with this whole story, it's like they pushed this to happen rather than just leaving the deer alone. They pushed it to the point to where it became distressed, to where it became a problem, to where they then had to kill it. So it almost feels like this whole thing is a ritualistic sacrifice, whether they intended it or not, whether it was something that was conscious or something that sort of just took place on the world stage, as these events tend to do. It seems like this whole event was a form of a sacrifice that I feel this creature will reincarnate. Obviously, white stags, albino creatures, will continue to be born into the world. They will continue to be a rare being. But I feel like there's something to this about this resurrection, this rebirth, especially, like I said, since this is occurring right after the equinox and leading into Samhain. I feel like there is a message that will be presented to us, and it's being shown to us through this event, that there will be a rebirth. I feel like there will either be another white stag that will be seen soon, or some other form of a reincarnation, a rebirth-themed event or message that shows that this creature, the essence, the purity of this being, the higher divine aspect that's incarnated in this being will be shown to us to be reborn in some way, either closer to Samhain or right after or right before. Some sort of theme of rebirth will be shown to us, once again through the world stage of the rebirth of this creature. And I feel like the whole thing is a message of rebirth to us. That's just from the higher spirits with this whole event, like I said. So that's really, I feel like that's the message here. Because another message that was coming to me this morning after the dream I had, before I really looked into this story, I was getting the message that, you know, in my personal life, I've had to deal with crazy situations before, and I feel like I've had this recurring theme in my own life, like of death and rebirth, or of being attacked or being almost in a way killed or defeated, and yet I'm always able to rebirth myself, rebirth my situations, rebirth my circumstances, and sort of resurrect in that regard. And so that theme was coming to mind this morning after the dream I had last night. And I feel like this is something that resonates with many spiritual people, or with many, you know, magical people. Like, no matter how many times people may be able to harm us or defeat us or destroy us in some regard, we're always able to resurrect and rebirth our lives, rebirth our situations, rebirth our circumstances in some way, and come back from that, resurrect from that, return from that, oftentimes into even better situations than we had before. So I feel like that is also a message on the personal level that's also being communicated to us through this event. It's almost like it's reminding us of these themes as we head into Samhain. No matter how dire things get or how bad things look, even if it is to the point of death or something being destroyed, that death is the resurrection. We need to remember that in our personal lives, and in our spiritual thinking, in our alchemical thinking. We need to always remember that death is the resurrection. Death is just another form of transformation and change in the end. So no matter how bad it might look or seem or be, it will always lead to rebirth and resurrection, and we need to remember that theme. I feel like that will also be very important during this time. And like I said, I mean, this fits automatically anyways with leading into Samhain, but I feel like there'll be something emphasized with it, either in our personal lives or in something that's going on in the world with this energy and during this time. So yeah, just remember that. Keep that in your mind. Keep that in your soul. Trust in that power and that energy of that eternal sort of goodness and eternal resurrecting energy that is sort of backing us all. It's within us. It's all around us in the world. We can see it plainly that death is never really the end. It's always sort of this resurrecting principle of life. And I've said this many times before. If you think about it, death really isn't a thing, because even in death, other things are feeding off of that. Other life is feeding off of death. So it's always contributing further to life in some way. So it's just a transformation. It's just a rebirth in some way, shape, or form. So just remember that that is a thing, that is a reality, and that we also hold that power within us in our lives. And whatever comes of the situation, that there will be some form of rebirth and resurrecting aspect to it as well. So yeah, that's all I really wanted to come on and say. I felt kind of compelled to come on and share this message. Hopefully it resonates with you all in some way during this time, or will soon. That's going to be all for this video. I'll see you guys on the next one. As always, until next time, Hail Hecate, hail to the witches, Hail to the White Stag, and blessed be.